After wrapping up his tasks for the day, employee let his coworkers know he was heading home. His coworker abruptly halted his movement, addressing him formally as assistant manager Hoon. He brings up the company dinner that everyone had been eagerly anticipating, then firmly holds his colleague by the neck to keep him from leaving. Clearly unhappy with the thought of him not attending, he emphasizes that the gathering just wouldn't feel right without his presence. At the same time, two of their coworkers leaned in close, quietly speculating that planned to avoid the dinner and spend the evening by himself. Harbored a sense of resentment as he considered that these gatherings catered only to those who found them enjoyable, believing the others could get along just fine in his absence. His mind drifted to the sight of his own desk, cluttered with endless stacks of documents, and he understood that if his responsibilities were lighter, the situation might not feel so overwhelming. After countless days of overtime, he finally reached his limit and managed to leave work at the scheduled hour for the first time. Just as he was about to go, Secretary Lee gently rested her hand on his shoulder, expressing her sympathy for what he was going through. She recognized that everyone had been pushing themselves to the brink of exhaustion and expressed her understanding of how challenging it was for them. For a brief moment, experiences a wave of relief as he believes that she alone truly understands him. Surprising him, raised her voice with excitement and proposed that, since everyone agreed, they ought to mark the occasion by having drinks together that evening. Felt a wave of shock and confusion wash over him, convinced that the intense pressure at work had caused everyone around him to lose their sanity. Found himself questioning how he had landed in a job that overwhelmed its staff with endless tasks, pushing everyone to their limits. He had always hoped his position with the government would offer a healthy balance between his career and personal life, allowing time for both duty and relaxation. He began to walk away. He notices someone unusual in a hoodie and face mask, instantly realizing it's the same petitioner he had encountered earlier that day. Senses that something is wrong. The stranger appears unpredictable, making realize he should escape as soon as possible. However, before he can leave, the man blocks his path and questions whether is the same worker he spoke with earlier that day. Recalled informing the man that he couldn't fulfill his requests, explaining that higher authorities had given him instructions he was unable to disobey. In the present moment, the man questioned about being ignored, while attempted to clarify that he was simply adhering to the rules. Stepped forward and politely informed the man that the workday had already ended, requesting that he return the following day. Upon hearing this, the man's anger boiled over. Feeling overlooked, he erupted in rage, hurling accusations at and lashing out at him, convinced that was the source of all his troubles. Collapsed onto the ground, his body soaked with his own blood. As his assailant loomed above him, the attacker shouted angrily, insisting that no one should live their life in such a manner. As awareness fades, confusion fills his thoughts as he tries to grasp the meaning behind it all. In those last fleeting seconds, his mind drifts to his one modest wish, to balance his life between working just enough and finding time to rest. Jolted awake, his eyes scanning his body in disbelief as he realized he was completely unscathed. He notices that it has been quite a while since he was last wounded by a blade. Now, he inhabits the form of a different young man, someone with flowing hair and dressed in old-fashioned attire. His new identity is a name that has replaced the one he once had, Hoon. A different man shouted too, requesting some water, and quickly replied, addressing the man as uncle. A whole year had gone by since the stabbing that ended his life. He found himself granted a new beginning when he was sent to a world governed by martial arts. Fortunate to possess memories, the boy whose body he now occupied, he found it surprisingly easy to adjust to his unfamiliar circumstances. Realized that the guiding principle from his previous existence, to balance effort and relaxation, matched seamlessly with the calmness of his current life. He believed he could spend the remainder of his life surrounded by such tranquility and ease. However, he quickly realized that this plan would not endure for very long. Senses that the calm future he once dreamed of has been completely destroyed. Without warning, flames erupted and consumed the inn where he was employed. Hurried over, grabbing buckets of water in a desperate attempt to extinguish the spreading flames. He fumed inwardly, questioning why disaster had struck therein specifically, but he quickly resolved that making sure everyone escaped unharmed was more important than finding answers right now. He notices his uncle pinned beneath a flaming wooden beam. Moving quickly, she hurries over to grab him and help him escape. He comes to an abrupt halt, stunned by the unexpected sight before him. An elderly man with flowing white hair stood beside the lifeless body of the innkeeper. The elderly man explained in a composed manner that his behavior was due to the noodles he had been served being extremely unpleasant. Dismissed the excuse as insignificant, yet the old man remained unwavering, claiming the food had been terrible enough to warrant his actions, and that setting the building on fire was merely an extra satisfaction. The elderly man glanced at and commented that civilities were being squandered on serving food. The man extends an opportunity for the other to become his disciple, making it clear that refusal will result in death. Just then was overwhelmed by a rush of memories from both his previous life and the moment he died. The man had lost his life at the hands of someone driven insane by feeling overlooked, even though he had merely been doing his job. Now, he recognized that same wild look in the elderly man who destroyed an entire building and took lives all because of his anger over a disappointing bowl of noodles. His face twisted with fury as he demanded the old man stop wasting his time and get to the point. He wondered whether the man believed brandishing a knife allowed him to act however he pleased. He keeps yelling that he refuses to take orders from someone he considers insane, insisting that they return the peaceful life he had always wished for. At that moment, a different man wearing an eye patch emerged and delivered a quick, forceful hit too, causing him to fall unconscious. Lying on the ground, reflects that, unlike in his previous life, he finally expressed all the thoughts he had been holding inside. He questions once more whether asking for a balanced mix of work and rest is truly such an unreasonable request. The elderly man instructed his companions to bring along with them. His eyes fluttered open, and he realized he was riding inside a carriage that was steadily moving along. He grew anxious upon noticing the elderly man standing before him, who, with a composed demeanor, informed him that he was now awake. Could hardly believe he had survived. He had been certain the man would end his life after he shouted directly at him. The elderly man unexpectedly expresses regret, confessing that he had not been telling the truth. It was revealed that the Alliance was actually responsible for the devastation of the inn. The elderly man clarifies that while he was merely traveling through the region, the Alliance accused him falsely, using it as an excuse to tighten their hold on power. Remained skeptical of the man's tale, yet found himself unable to reject it outright. His time spent at the inn had taught him that, regardless of whether martial artists claimed noble or wicked intentions, they were all essentially just troublemakers in his eyes. Wondered aloud about the reason behind the man's initial deception, prompting the man to admit that his motive had been to assess true nature. The old man went on to explain that he had been deeply moved by his unwavering spirit, noting how had preferred to face death rather than submit to the guidance of a foe. The elderly man conveyed his contentment, confidently claiming that he had never misjudged anyone. Silently amends his thoughts, firmly believing that the elderly man must be losing his mind. The old man, however, goes on to clarify that he acted out of necessity, insisting that he had no alternative. The authorities planned to claim that a public enemy had been there, yet everyone knew such a person would never spare an ordinary messenger. Instead, people would expect the boy to be killed and then accused of causing everything himself. The man explained that there were only two choices left for him: to become the man's disciple and join his side. The only alternative was to meet death at the hands of the Alliance. Understanding the seriousness of his predicament, quickly adopts a more respectful attitude and politely inquires about the man's name, a change in demeanor that the old man immediately observes. The elderly man reveals that his name is. Here's the name, but it means nothing to him. The elderly man went on to clarify that his reputation was widely recognized. Throughout the Central Plains, people referred to him as the Heavenly Demon. Instantly remembers how, in martial arts stories, the title of Heavenly Demon stands for unmatched fighting strength and leadership over the demonic sect. The sect went by various names. The term is ultimately used to refer to the leader of a sect. However, the main distinction lay in the sheer magnitude of their power, which was overwhelmingly vast. Considered that if this group operated like a present-day cult, he would instantly turn them down because of their illegal actions. However, realizing it was not the case, he wondered if joining might actually be acceptable. Just then, the Heavenly Demon cut off his train of thought by bringing up the topic of work-life balance, something had loudly mentioned earlier, causing him to feel awkward and self-conscious. Upon arriving at their destination, the heavenly demon inquired about the young man's name, responded by explaining that he did not possess a family name, he was simply known as. The heavenly demon greeted him warmly, inviting him to join the sect. A large group of devoted followers knelt in orderly rows, awaiting the arrival of their leaders with respectful bows. The devoted followers welcomed their revered leader, known as the heavenly demon, earnestly seeking his guidance and deliverance. Witnessing this, felt overwhelmed by awe, realizing that the spectacle before him surpassed anything he had expected. He imagined what it would be like to hold the power and responsibility of leading a religious cult. He wondered whether people would see him in a new light from now on. The heavenly demon led him to a grand palace named, explaining that the palace would become his own if he agreed to become the demon's student. The heavenly demon then asked him to remain while he considered the offer. He gives his word that he will look into the identity of whoever ordered the assassins to attack the inn himself. He realizes that he is likely suffering deeply from the loss of his uncle, a man who had filled the role of a father in his life. He made a solemn vow, invoking his title as the heavenly demon, that he would offer his assistance in this situation, regardless of whether the other chose to become his disciple. Deeply touched by the vow, lowered himself to the ground in gratitude and addressed the other man as his master. The heavenly demon reacts with astonishment at how quickly he makes up his mind. Having already reached his decision, feels there is nothing else he can do. With no alternatives left, he resolves to give his utmost effort. The heavenly demon acknowledges the choice as a prudent one. He explains that he will assign an attendant to serve and protect, and through this attendant, will be taught the teachings and traditions of the divine heavenly demon sect. Expressed his gratitude to him once more. Noticed a girl walking toward him and guessed she must be the attendant the heavenly demon had spoken about. He couldn't help but reflect on how quickly everything was happening, which matched his expectations for a group known for its intense devotion. Found himself awestruck by her appearance, comparing her to a renowned celebrity in his mind. The thought of someone so stunning attending to his everyday necessities left him feeling both nervous and overwhelmed. He quickly chastises himself, noting that, if he counted his previous life, his true age would actually be in his 30s. He considered that becoming entangled with her might be. The girl lowered her head in a respectful bow, stating her name as Jin, and declaring her intention to serve him from that moment forward. Upon hearing this, quickly changed his mind, thinking he might need to look at the situation differently. He explains to himself that since his body is now only 15 years old, the difference in their ages no longer seems very large. Broke his concentration, and, expressing regret that she had to bring this up during their initial encounter, informed him that he needed to begin getting ready to join the. Found himself puzzled, trying to figure out the true nature of the. She went on to describe the academy as the sect's most prestigious institution, a place where exceptional individuals began their studies at 16, and where every prominent leader of the sect had once trained. She further emphasized that, as the disciple of the heavenly demon, he was expected to finish his studies as the top student, for anything less would tarnish his master's reputation. At that moment, understood that this challenge would be far from simple. Recognized the urgency of the situation, yet offered comforting assurance, encouraging him to remain calm and not be concerned. The mood in the room changes abruptly, growing tense and formal. Confidently announces her intention to help him become the most powerful. She wasted no time putting him through an intense training routine, making him repeat the sect's mottos such as Advent of the Heavenly Demon, while forcing him to do push-ups. She raises her voice at him, criticizing the quietness of his response and insisting that he repeat it more loudly. She kept urging him forward without pause, her voice raised as she demanded that he extend his arms properly. His body gave out entirely, overcome by sheer exhaustion. Once more she yelled at him, demanding that he stand up. Let out a sharp gasp, feeling overwhelmed by exhaustion, and admitted to himself that he could not continue any longer. Demanded to know if he had been forced into this by someone threatening him with a sword, pointing out that he had willingly chosen the divine sect himself. Meanwhile, could only protest silently in his mind, insisting that he had never made that choice, and that was the one pressuring him now. She seized his arm, urging him to face the challenge ahead with unwavering grit and steadfast resolve. He appeared startled, yet he nodded his acceptance. She slumped onto her shoulder, silently concluding that all the members of this demonic sect must be out of their minds. As he rests on the ground, reflects on how his training that day has pushed far beyond what any normal person could endure. Even though he had never trained in martial arts, his remarkable abilities showed that he possessed a natural gift, as if the heavens themselves had favored him. She marvels at how the heavenly demon can identify someone with such extraordinary skill. She acknowledges that this is exactly why everyone feels compelled to admire him, and with great excitement, she begins to recite the sect's slogans. Opened his eyes in the darkness of his room, confusion filling his mind as he tried to recall his surroundings. His memory only reached back to his most recent training session with Jin. He becomes aware that she is present in the room, using her internal energy to gently massage his back. He leaps back, overwhelmed by fear and surprise. She explained in a gentle tone that she had been using a healing method on him while he slept, mentioning that the process was still incomplete and requesting that he lie back down so she could finish the treatment. Claims that Jin acts like a strict and demanding drill sergeant. She assumes her healing method is simply meant to speed up his recovery, allowing her to send him back to harsh training right away. This approach stirs up distressing memories from his previous life as a soldier. He believed that ordeal had brought him more pain than he could bear. Overwhelmed, he cried out, insisting that he could not continue living this way. He insists on taking at least one break during every half-season, which in gaming terms is roughly an hour. To him, maintaining a balance between work and personal life matters most, and he is determined to protect his downtime at all costs. Gives a firm and emotionless refusal to the request. He clarified that, at 15 years old, he had just a single year remaining before beginning his studies at the, leaving no room for idleness. Felt anxious, questioning whether she would always act with such harshness, and expressed his concern by pondering the possibility of dying from sheer exhaustion. She responds with composure, assuring him that he is strong enough to handle this level of training without collapsing. She expressed her unwavering loyalty by declaring that, should he lose his life, she would willingly join him in death and remain devoted to him as a spirit. Recoiled in fear at her overwhelming devotion, internally labeling her behavior as obsessive. He silently pleaded with her to stop equating talk of dying alongside him with genuine loyalty. The situation weighed heavily on him, filling him with anxiety, yet he ultimately understood that there were no other options available. Realizing that arguing would be useless, he chooses to shift his approach. He declared that continuing life in this manner was unbearable, and he would prefer to lose everything instead. She wonders aloud what he intends by his statement. He boldly states his intention to ruin his master's good name before ending his own life. His expression shifts as she questions whether he might later regret his words. Responded with assurance, declaring that he would not take responsibility. He further remarked that while his master might bear the shame of having an incompetent student, that concern did not bother him at all. She wonders aloud whether he truly believes she would simply do nothing and let that occur. Confronted her, questioning whether she intended to take his life. Without hesitation, she lunged at him and struck him hard in the chest with her fist. She warned him that she would eliminate any potential threat that might tarnish the reputation of the heavenly demon. She felt indifferent to being labeled an apostate by others, since she had already accepted the possibility of giving up this life herself. Gave a sly, mocking grin and remarked that if the master ended his life, it would prove that the master had been the one to label him an apostate. Froze in place, her assault halted as she tried to process the surprising reasoning he had just presented. Reflects inwardly, believing that acting with courage was the best choice. He comes to understand that his sole advantage is his status as the disciple of the heavenly demon. He realized he needed to go beyond his usual limits if he wanted to make this moment work in his favor. He is convinced that the obsessed follower has fallen for the trap and is now puzzled by her leader's choice. Explained to her that, despite the situation he had placed her in, he never actually promised not to train. He informs her that he has just 2 requests. At the start, he requested a rest period every half, which equaled 1 hour, while training. Following that, he insisted on being assured of 3.5 or 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Questioned about whether he truly felt content with such modest requests, and after a moment of hesitation, he admitted that he was. promised to put all his effort into training if his wishes were granted, explaining that he was determined not to disgrace his master. Hearing this, accepted conditions. She reminded him of the importance of honoring his commitment to train diligently. He instructs the individual to lie back down so the treatment can proceed, and the session can be completed. Silently wishes he hadn't been so tough during the negotiations, questioning whether a gentler approach might have been better. The following day arrived, bringing with it a session of martial arts training led by the Heavenly Demon. The Heavenly Demon watched as pushed himself through intense training, not stopping until exhaustion finally him. Impressed by his unwavering dedication, the Heavenly Demon expressed silent admiration for his persistence. Attributes their success to his remarkable focus. Though weary, reflected inwardly that if he continued progressing like this, he would easily achieve mastery in advanced external techniques. After enduring a year of intense and exhausting training, he considered it only natural to have achieved this level of strength. In his mind, the true issue would have been if he had stayed weak. It dawned on him that the rest periods he had bargained for were the reason he was still able to persevere. Moved to his side and gently wrapped her arm around him, reassuring him that there was nothing to worry about. From that day forward, the Heavenly Demon declared his intention to personally teach the secrets of the demonic arts. Reflected on what the term truly meant. The Heavenly Demon clarifies that within their sect, the term demon is not seen as something evil. Instead, it represents the core of human nature and serves as a force used to shield the innocent and overcome those who do wrong. Comes to the conclusion that what people call the demonic arts is likely just the unique form of martial arts practiced by the sect. Nevertheless, considering the environment, he chooses to remain cautious and refrains from accepting things without question. He confidently inquired of his master whether the demonic arts carried any negative consequences. The Heavenly Demon found the idea amusing and responded with laughter. They claimed there were only benefits, emphasizing that the greatest one was how these advantages enabled swift advancement. He cautiously mentions the possibility of experiencing side effects. He points out that there's a significant danger of the key deviating, yet he expresses confidence in his ability to surpass this obstacle. Internally, boils with frustration, silently blaming the sect leader for withholding such important information from the start. Trying to keep his composure, inquires further about the different martial arts available and wants to know what negative consequences each might have. The Heavenly Demon nodded in agreement, mentioning that he had planned to explain everything regardless. He then instructed the listener to pay close attention before making any decisions. He started by unleashing the explosive sword technique, a fierce and mighty skill known for its ability to shatter mountain summits. Experiencing difficulty managing anger was one of the side effects. The second technique was called the manual demonic arts, an ice-based skill powerful enough to cover a whole region in frost. The medication caused an increase in sexual desire as a side effect. The third technique was known as the Mad Soul Sword technique, a sword art renowned for its limitless adaptability. The medication often caused people to see and hear things that weren't really there. As the list continued, buried his face in his hands, overcome with hopelessness, uncertain whether he was selecting a fighting technique or a psychological affliction. His voice trembling with anxiety, wonders if his master has truly perfected all these martial arts despite their imperfections. The Heavenly Demon responded by posing yet another question, which left utterly stunned. He struggled to comprehend if what he was experiencing was actually happening, his thoughts racing with disbelief. In his mind, realized that the Heavenly Demon was far more than just a sect leader. He seemed like a collection of madness all in one person. The Heavenly Demon calmly assures him that his concerns are unnecessary. It was possible to find ways to counteract the harmful effects caused by practicing the demonic arts. He went on to describe how the demonic arts were organized into 3 primary tiers. The first and most basic level was known as. The point at which the side effects are at their strongest is referred to as. At that point, once the side effects had been fully eliminated, they arrive at the last stage, known as. Wonders anxiously about the fate of those who never achieved the Talma stage throughout their lives. The Heavenly Demon rested his hand on the young man's shoulder, explaining that this very reason had guided his choice in selecting him. He brings up the test he assigned and confidently tells him that, due to his honest character, reaching Talma is within his grasp. Meanwhile, silently cries out in annoyance, desperate to find out the consequences if he doesn't succeed. The heavenly demon paid no attention to his question, instead urging him to decide immediately and select the demonic art he wished to master. After some contemplation, declared his desire to master the ruthless soul-seizing sword. The sword technique was recognized for its unbroken flow of relentless motions. The technique earned its name from its reputation for stealing the soul of its target, and it is rumored to leave those affected with symptoms of obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Believed that focusing on symmetry in his art would give him something he could control, hoping that striving for perfection would help him survive. However, he senses that life rarely unfolds the way he anticipates. The heavenly demon explained that their training would begin with fundamental movements, assuring him that he would first demonstrate each step at a slow pace. Responds with eager agreement. He began by describing the initial technique, known as the flying soul-seizing blade. He explained that the action was connected to the movement of unsheathing a sword to defend against an enemy's strike, then instructed him to retreat by moving his right foot backward. The sword should be drawn along the trajectory of the opponent's attack, allowing the defender to intercept the blow and get ready for the following action. The heavenly demon instructs the young man to copy his actions. Feels that the explanation seems confusing at first, but ultimately realizes it's simply about unsheathing a sword. Curiosity stirred within them as they considered how challenging the task might be. Whenever he attempted to draw the sword, it refused to budge, remaining firmly lodged in its scabbard. The heavenly demon offers a correction, clarifying that mastering the sword involves more than simply focusing on the hand gripping the weapon. Careful attention must also be given to the blade's angle and the positioning of the hand clutching the scabbard. He directed his hands with careful precision, leading the student to finally unsheathe the sword. Witnessing success, the master offered a nod of satisfaction, signaling his approval. His master informs him that some changes will be made before their training resumes. Persisted in honing his skills through continuous practice. He felt a sense of satisfaction, believing that his youth might be the reason he was picking things up so rapidly. The heavenly demon informed that he intended to move his sword at a deliberate, unhurried pace. He instructs him to defend against the attack by employing the flying soul-seizing blade technique as he unsheathes his sword. Although the motion was gradual, the tension remained overwhelming. Manages to defend himself expertly, stopping the attack before it can do any harm. His master offered words of praise and urged him to keep going. Felt a wave of surprise wash over him as he realized he had instinctively defended against the attack, relying on the stance he had trained in without even thinking about it. He starts to question whether he might actually be a genius. Once the exhausting training session finally concluded, the heavenly demon remarked that he had mastered the fundamentals of the technique and praised his impressive progress. Expressed his gratitude to him. He gazes down at himself, marveling at the remarkable powers he now possesses. His master's last attacks moved at such incredible speed that he struggled to keep up with his eyes, yet he still succeeded in blocking every single one without making a single error. The heavenly demon declared that the following lesson would involve instructing him in the art of developing inner strength. Had begun his training later than most, so his master decided to oversee his progress and assist him in channeling his energy. His master rested his hands gently on his body, describing how he would channel his own inner strength into his energy channels, following the principles of the unforgiving soul-seizing sword technique. She cautions him to carefully observe and track the movement of energy. Experiences an unfamiliar yet thrilling feeling as the energy starts to flow through various points within his body. He observes that his master's inner strength feels calm but unmistakably powerful, and under this careful instruction, he manages to remember how the energy moves and where each channel is found. The attempt resulted in the creation of a tiny energy core, no larger than a bean. His master praised his progress upon reaching the stage, encouraging him to keep working hard so he could one day attain the Talma stage. To show his satisfaction with the young man's recent improvement, the heavenly demon extends an invitation for him to join a dinner that evening alongside his elder brothers from the sect. Since this moment offered an ideal opportunity, introductions were in order. Decided to cleanse himself before meeting his master later, while his master assured him that he would be waiting for his return. Let out a sigh, feeling at the thought of joining yet another group dinner. He believes that the older brothers view him as a competitor for the title of Heavenly Demon, even though his only desire is to enjoy a quiet and comfortable life. Wondered aloud about the specific demonic technique that Jin had mastered. In response, Jin explained that she had learned the manual demonic art. Recalls how Frost would occasionally gather near her, and comes to understand that this is the cause, a realization she soon verifies. His eyes widened in disbelief as surprise washed over him. He abruptly recalled that practicing the manual demonic art came with an unintended consequence, an overwhelming surge of desire. Wished he had learned this earlier, especially now that he was finally beginning to feel comfortable with his surroundings. She found herself questioning the reason behind her decision to pursue this specific form of art when so many other options were available. While stands alone in the bathroom, a wave of anxiety washes over him. His mind races with worry about the side effect of the martial art that Jin Hei has mastered. He envisions the turmoil that might erupt if she were ever to lose command over her impulses. He envisions a scenario where everything might spiral into disorder. He plunged his head beneath the water, hoping the cool sensation would wash away his troubling thoughts. Explained to him that the manual demonic art caused different side effects, depending on whether the user was male or female. Reacted with surprise, wondering aloud what fate awaited women in that situation. She points out that women experience heightened clarity and approach situations with increased logic compared to their normal state. Considers this side effect to be quite minor when compared to the rest and wonders if there are any additional consequences. She confesses that emotions such as empathy and compassion are fading within them, and is struck with terror as he understands this could cause her to become a psychopath. Viewed this trait not as a weakness, but as a strength, believing the art was specifically designed to discipline those who betrayed their faith. Meanwhile, overwhelmed with frustration, silently insisted that this was the very meaning of a side effect and thought of her as excessively zealous. She expresses regret for any misunderstanding that resulted from her actions. Is struck by a chilling realization about the past and wonders if she truly meant to end his life when she seized him by the neck. This revelation convinces him that he can no longer treat the situation as something trivial. Once he finishes dressing, he gets ready for the most significant event of the evening, coming face to face with his older brothers. He recalls earlier words, revealing that he is the 8th disciple of the Heavenly Demon. He is aware that only 4 disciples, himself among them, have survived, as the rest lost their lives to either chi deviation or deadly battles. He becomes aware that his chances of making it through are just half, yet a strong resolve to stay alive fills him. Summoning confidence by recalling his former identity as Hoon, he stepped into the dining hall and introduced himself to everyone as the youngest disciple. The Heavenly Demon greeted the newcomer warmly and presented him to the group, announcing that he was the most recent and youngest disciple accepted in his twilight years. Wei Jin, the eldest brother, welcomed him with a friendly and cheerful demeanor. Recalls that uses the exploding spirit sword technique, a skill known for its dangerous side effect of causing intense, uncontrollable rage. The people began to call him the Mad Demon after he directed his fury towards dishonest officials, turning him into their enemy. Despite successfully surviving the perilous stage, he was unable to advance to the ultimate Talma stage. He was like a ticking time bomb, ready to burst at any moment. Acknowledges the greeting with equal respect, but internally reminds himself to remain cautious. Acknowledges the greeting with equal respect, but internally gave him a solid pat on the back. Sensed that the mood was fairly relaxed, so he decided to approach his 3rd eldest brother. He believed starting a conversation with him would be simpler, since they had been close in age before his brother passed away. Lowered his head in a respectful bow, offering his name as a formal introduction. He does not expect the way his 3rd eldest brother responds. His frustration evident, demanded an explanation from the other man about the reason behind his double bow. He wondered if the act of bowing twice meant that he was being regarded as someone already dead, since this gesture was traditionally performed only for those who had passed away. Recalls that Wan has mastered the 14 shadow arts, a sword technique famed for its swift and silent movements. His fighting style revealed itself to be a sinister technique, one crafted specifically for the art of assassination. The side effect caused him to become paranoid, making him constantly imagine the most negative outcomes in any scenario. Juan found himself trapped at the highest level of the Ma stage, overwhelmed by its harsh side effects, which left him feeling deeply misunderstood when offered his greeting. One claimed that stubble bow was a sign that he hoped for his death. He walked up to the other person and questioned why he wouldn't simply deny it if it wasn't true. Feels trapped, unable to find a way out of the situation, and he understands that no matter what he says, Juan will twist his words against him. Wei Jin, the elder sibling, stepped in with a cheerful laugh, suggesting to Juan that his joke had gone a bit overboard. He suggested that feeling hungry could have made him more sensitive, then handed him a fresh pair of chopsticks. Caught off guard, Juan offers an uncertain apology. Admitting that he was to blame because he had not learned the correct manners. Reacts with astonishment to the circumstances, having always assumed that only lunatics inhabited this place. It appeared that one rational individual was present within the group. He suspects that this man is his sixth eldest brother, and believes that out of all his siblings, he might be the one he can trust the most. However, insists that this is not the appropriate moment to address the matter. She instructed him to say hello to his older brother, gesturing toward a spot where no one was standing. Another man burst into laughter and questioned, clearly doubting the truth of his words. The man addresses someone as referring to him as his fourth older brother. Puzzled by this, questions internally who the man could possibly mean, since the fourth brother was believed to have fallen in combat. At that moment, it comes back to him that martial skills involve the dangerous and chaotic mad soul sword technique. The medication caused side effects that made people hear and see things that weren't real, similar to the symptoms of schizophrenia. Huck let out a hearty laugh and joined in with teasing, pretending that he was longing for the company of the fourth brother. Expresses regret, admitting that the same thing has occurred once more. The heavenly demon observed the brothers looking out for one another, and felt a sense of warmth fill his heart at their display of care. He is gripped by fear, convinced that he is trapped in a living nightmare, and he anxiously speculates about what fate awaits at the end of this unsettling assembly. He notices his stomach growling, so he makes up his mind to find something to eat. He recalled how he hadn't been able to eat anything during the previous company dinner. As he attempts to take a bite, the rest of the group carried on their conversation, focusing on topics related to their jobs. This behavior causes him a significant amount of irritation. Wei Jin observed the uncertainty on his face and decided to clarify things ahead of time, knowing that would soon become involved in these affairs. Nodded in agreement, silently accepting his fate as he prepared to join the others, a sense of resignation weighing on his thoughts. Wei Jin started outlining the circumstances making it clear that the heavenly demon, along with his trusted followers, regularly traveled through the sex lands to carry out inspections. He recounts how, on the previous tour, a surprising factor named showed up at an inn, drawing the master's attention, and because of concerns for his well-being, the master was compelled to go back to headquarters ahead of schedule. Because of this, the master organized the work dinner that evening, aiming both to hear updates from the senior disciples who had finished their inspection tour and to present to his elder brothers. Once the explanation had concluded, the heavenly demon turned to, expressing curiosity about his thoughts on the conversation up to that point, and wanting to hear how viewed the divine sex treatment of ordinary people. Being an outsider is sought out for his unique viewpoint, as others are eager to learn if he has suggestions for making things better. Ilmac comes to the understanding that he is being tested. He is aware that every one of his older brothers aims to become the heavenly demon, and they do not hesitate to battle one another for the chance to claim that title. Unlike others, also known as Hun, stood out as someone truly unique. He showed no interest in the ongoing battle for control. His only concern was finding comfort and satisfying his endless appetite. He realizes that determined individuals such as Jin will make sure he stays focused and diligent. From that moment on, he resolved to separate himself entirely from their group's concerns, adopting the persona of a perpetual middle manager, an individual uninterested in leadership and unwilling to align with any particular side. In order to achieve his goals, he needed to present himself as someone ordinary, someone who seemed to be missing something, neither exceptionally intelligent nor remarkable in any way. He resembled a newcomer at work, eager and energetic, yet lacking experience and knowledge. A person puts in a lot of effort, yet their accomplishments never quite measure up. In simpler terms, He was a top-tier example of someone whose ambitions had ended in disappointment. Fortunately, his experiences with the red tape of bureaucracy in his previous life had provided him with the ideal solution to this problem. Started outlining his proposal, emphasizing that their first step should be to create a well-defined reporting system along with uniform documents. In this arrangement, the superiors simply go over the reports, leaving the actual tasks to those below them, which spares the elder brothers from having to handle the demanding work themselves. Next, he recommends breaking down responsibilities and assigning them to individuals who focus on specific areas, while also having the officials switch between various regions and departments on a regular basis. He points out that keeping a person in the same position for too long can make corruption more likely. By rotating their assignments and relocating them to different areas, authorities could reduce the risk of them forming alliances with influential figures in the region. He explained that with a thorough reporting system in place, transferring responsibilities would go smoothly, making it simple to rotate between departments. He determined that the two approaches worked well together, forming an ideal solution. Silently questioned whether these complicated rules had any real purpose in this world. From what he had learned in the past, he understood that separating departments and establishing reporting hierarchies often gave people an excuse to avoid taking responsibility. As reports continued to accumulate and tasks fell behind schedule, those very reports eventually served as evidence for assigning fault. The frequent shifting between departments created an atmosphere of disorder. It was uncommon for someone who had previously worked there to leave anything behind for the person taking their place. Wee Jin Hawk himself, determined to teach the inexperienced newcomer a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. She wanted to illustrate to him how fantasy and reality were not the same, and to reveal what could occur if excitement lacked real foundation. Resolved that to convincingly play the part of an inexperienced newcomer, he would accept a few blows if necessary. Instead of reacting as expected, Wee Jin Hawk gently ruffled his hair, pulled him into a warm embrace, and burst into laughter. He assured the master that the youngest brother possessed more intelligence than anyone had realized. Meanwhile, remained rooted to the spot, bewildered by the unexpected situation. Commended suggestion, noting that had considered the risk of worker corruption and that his system matched the core principles. Meanwhile, felt a surge of frustration inside, realizing that had misunderstood his true intentions. The heavenly demon let out a laugh, observing that obsession with the idea of perfection appeared to be a result of his martial arts training, which seemed to cause symptoms similar to obsessive-compulsive disorder. Meanwhile, quietly insisted to himself that this wasn't true. Juan, the third eldest brother, observes that has only just begun his training, yet he already shows remarkable progress both in martial arts and intelligence. Meanwhile, becomes increasingly frustrated. The master chooses to pause the work discussion and lets everyone know he'll summon later for a private conversation. He then declares that it's time to celebrate. Meanwhile, silently pleads for them to move on. Later on, ILMOK considered how, even though it had been around for a long time, South Korea's bureaucratic system was far more advanced than anything he had seen in the martial arts world. He realized that the so-called divine sect operated without any real structure. Instead, it was complete chaos, with the heavenly demon issuing commands that everyone was forced to obey. He comes to understand that his error lay in believing the master's authority by itself had created an organized system. Once dinner ended, mentioned to Jin that he planned to step out for a bit to help his meal settle. Jin reminded him to come back before the outer martial arts practice started. As he left, reflected internally that his recent successful suggestion had only caused his responsibilities to grow heavier. He grumbled about his schedule being packed ever since doctrine studies was added, questioning to himself when he would ever find time to relax. He steps outdoors, hoping to discover something that will ease his mind. He notices a young girl making her way along the path ahead of him. She silently reflects on the concept of healing. He mentally notes that, as a man in his 30s named Hoon, he shouldn't let himself be swayed simply by the sight of an adorable child. He observes her frightened expression and concludes that the most important thing is to reassure her by acting with maturity. With a broad grin lighting up his face, he walks over to her and politely inquires about the reason for her presence. The girl's words come out haltingly as she tries to speak. He notices that her doll has slipped from her grasp and plunged into the water. He assured her that she could rely on his support. The girl gestures toward the spot where the doll rests. Dove fearlessly into the deep water. She picks it up and hands it back to her. He grows self-conscious, realizing his attempt to appear impressive has left him feeling awkward. The girl expressed her gratitude to him for rescuing her doll. He wondered aloud why she spent her time playing by herself, and she explained that her family never joined in her games. Instead, they only ever told her to practice. Feels touched by what she says, suddenly recognizing that her struggles mirror the challenges he faces in his own life. He said his name was, while she responded by telling him her name was. He proposes that they arrange to see each other again the following day. He reconsidered and proposed that they start meeting each day at lunchtime, allowing him to spend time playing with her regularly. Wondered aloud whether truly intended to keep his promise of playing with her every day, and eagerly confirmed that his promise was genuine and unwavering. To finalize their promise, they linked their pinkies together in a playful but sincere gesture. Several days passed, and during a training session, Jin observed that appeared unusually cheerful. She wonders aloud whether he has experienced anything enjoyable lately. Attempts to divert her attention, attributing his cheerful demeanor to how quickly he has been advancing in his studies. He confidently claims that, if things continue as they are, he should be able to complete his doctrinal studies in just 6 months. Nodded in agreement, whilst conscience weighed heavily with guilt over having misled others without meaning to. He had chosen to deceive her, driven by the fear that Jin would stop him from seeing if she ever discovered the truth. The daily meeting served as his sole opportunity to unwind. He resolved to defend it at any price, unwavering in his commitment. Without warning, the heavenly demon appeared before and expressed approval at how quickly was advancing. Both of them offered him a friendly greeting. The master praised for sharing an impressive viewpoint during dinner, though he pointed out that Saidia felt somewhat out of touch with the actual situation within the sect. The man decided to give him a new task, instructing him to visit the sect in person and come up with suggestions for how it could be improved after observing it firsthand. Attempts to avoid the task by explaining that he still lacks experience and has much to improve upon. However, the master insists that, while training matters, postponing this real-world assignment would not be a smart decision. The master concludes that should depart the following day, a decision that leaves feeling annoyed. The master explained that would join him, allowing to practice during free moments and keep up with his training. However, felt an intense dislike for this plan. Came back to his training, weighed down by a sense of despair. Noticing the urgency, instructed him to master footwork and the art of lightness without delay, reminding him that time was running out. His mind is consumed by thoughts of how much he longs for. In another part of the area, practiced by herself, her expression tinged with sadness. A woman walked up to her, curious about his activities. Observing his lack of attention, the woman firmly pointed out her distraction. Expresses her regret. She resumes her training with renewed determination. The woman let out a sigh, her expression showing clear admiration as she softly murmured the name. She brushes off the concern, insisting nothing is wrong, and instructs her to keep practicing until she comes back. The woman turned and left, her thoughts heavy with guilt over nearly violating the rules. In her thoughts, she recognized the importance of the moment and silently offered an apology to. He pleaded with her to hold on a bit more. Once more, finds herself by herself. The following morning, wore a gloomy expression as he got ready to depart. Moved ahead of him, carrying their bags, while silently reflected on the reality that his departure was only a day away. Walked away, regretful that he hadn't been able to inform about his abrupt exit, and found himself wishing he knew her family's address so he could at least send her a note. Inwardly, he expresses regret to her and silently vows to come back quickly, hoping she will patiently await his return. He met the bodyguards chosen by the master to watch over him, the one named who he was introduced first. The second individual was known as Guan. Welcomes the group with a friendly gesture. A wave of relief washes over him as he discovers that the master will not be joining their group, and he starts thinking of ways to appear busy with inspections while actually sneaking in some rest. He considered purchasing a present for, but felt uncertain about what kind of things would appeal to kids growing up in a martial arts world. However, his hopes for a break quickly disappear as Jin Hei blocks his path to the carriage and informs him that he will now be running with the group instead. feels confused, unable to grasp the point she is trying to make. Without warning, the carriage lurches forward and begins to speed away. He was left with no choice but to chase after it, shouting at Hyun in frustration as he ran. She explained to him in a steady voice that this was another aspect of their training. She reminded him that he had practiced light footwork just the day before, and now it was time to put that skill to the test by matching the pace of the moving carriage. As he ran alongside, she kept giving him guidance, urging him to maintain a straight waist and stay alert. She stressed how important it was for him to hold his posture steady, even when faced with tough and challenging circumstances. She informs him that his only breaks will come when they practice breathing exercises together. Upon arriving at their destination, strength gives out, and he drops to the ground, completely worn out. They found themselves curious about the nature of this unusual form of rest. Struggling to control his turbulent energy, he found the breathing exercises especially difficult inside the jostling carriage, and could only just manage to settle himself without truly resting. Reached out to assist him in standing, assuring him that they would begin the purification process and blood channel activation exercises right away. Briefly wonders if she might care about him, but she quickly mentions that the doctrine lessons are scheduled to start in 2 hours, after one Shijin. She instructs him to complete his preparations before the deadline, while quietly laments his misfortune. The following morning arrived. As they strolled through the quiet village, felt a rare sense of ease settling over him. He realized he had no real interest in making the demonic sect better, knowing that any ideas he offered would only lead to extra responsibilities for himself. He decided to pretend not to know anything, even if an excellent solution occurred to him. Wanted to know what he thought about the area, and he responded that the village appeared pleasant to him. He inquired about the responsibilities the believers had in this place, and she replied that their main task was to keep thieves and bandits in check. However, because the area was near the main headquarters, troublemakers were rarely seen. Rather than seeking power, they devoted themselves to assisting ordinary people with everyday challenges and shared knowledge about sexual teachings. Once the tour ended, informed him that they would resume their activities the next day, following the planned schedule. She sarcastically wondered if they ought to travel across all of Xinjiang in search of solutions for improvement. She notes that the following village lies over 1,000 li in the distance, indicating they still have a long way to run. Abruptly interrupts her, proclaiming that an excellent idea has just come to him. Requested that fetch a brush, some ink, and a sheet of paper, promising her with confidence that his plan was certain to succeed. Believes he has a few solutions in mind, yet he struggles to put them into action because the sexual circumstances limit his options. Despite his concerns, he realizes that even a flawed strategy is preferable to being unprepared. As he continues writing, uncertainty gnaws at him, making him question whether his plan will truly be enough. He worries that his idea might lead to unexpected issues, so he chooses to treat it as a starting point and plans to work out the details in the future. From afar, Hui and Guan kept a close eye on him. Hui found himself amazed at how managed to record so much information after only observing for a few hours, causing him to question whether the stories about clever tactics might actually be accurate. Wondered aloud if Hui was referring to the reporting system that had suggested earlier. In response, Hui admitted that he had once believed it was only gossip, but now he found himself unable to question skills. Guan Mu doubted the value of numerous opinions, believing that just because there were many did not make them worthwhile. They were required to bring genuine value to the sect. Jin Hei approached the group, expressing agreement with Mu's opinion, yet pointed out that young master stood apart from the others. Hui wondered aloud whether she placed her trust in him. She responds with a gentle smile, expressing that no one surpasses the young master when it comes to taking a rest. Showed the finished plan to the guards, who looked it over with admiration and praised its quality. Remains discontent, convinced that the plan is missing a crucial component needed for perfection. Without warning, he comes to understand that his relentless pursuit of flawlessness could be a consequence of practicing his martial art. He swiftly rejects the thought, reassuring himself that his decision stems from the fact that his new plan focuses mainly on children, who must be approached with caution. He privately acknowledges to himself that it brings to his mind. Whilst thoughts wandered too, abruptly halted his steps and firmly instructed him to remain still. She gazes through the doorway and notices a band of horseback bandits drawing near. She observes their meticulous organization and concludes that they are probably soldiers who have abandoned their posts. The guards communicated silently, secretly plotting to wipe everyone out, but chose to remain hidden and watch for now. Observes that expression is filled with determination. A bandit announced their plan to murder the men and sell the women into captivity. The bandit leader protested, insisting that seizing their riches had been a desperate final option. The leader instructed his followers to ensure that no one would be hurt. He remains firm in his decision, feeling responsible for making sure his brothers have enough to eat. The leader demands that the caravan surrender all their belongings if they wish to stay alive. Guan, the guard, suddenly lunged forward to strike at them. Meanwhile, the leader of the bandits looked back on their choices with regret, silently wishing for a chance at an honest life. From inside the carriage, shouted desperately, pleading with to spare his life. Just in time, redirects his sword, narrowly avoiding the leader's neck. The remaining bandits grew furious, insulting the sect members as worthless and swearing to wipe every one of them out. Questioned in her mind the reason behind his reluctance to allow them to eliminate the bandits, considering that these foes were merely petty thieves who posed little challenge. Remaining composed, instructs her to stay silent and observe what unfolds. The guards swiftly overpowered the bandits, leaving every one of them sprawled on the ground, knocked out cold. Announces that these individuals are the last piece needed to complete his scheme. That night, the bandit leader regained consciousness only to discover that he had been securely bound, unable to move a single muscle. Suddenly steps into view and checks to see if the other person has regained consciousness. He addresses Hanggun directly by name, leaving Hanggun puzzled about how this stranger could possibly know it. Explained that discovering the information had been easy. His men quickly revealed all their secrets when offered delicious meals and the company of attractive women. Discloses his awareness of the sorrowful events that shaped past. He remembered how a less experienced officer had advanced ahead of him because of influential relatives, and how, when he offered guidance out of concern, he was instead accused of embezzlement and blamed for wrongdoing. He and his men had narrowly avoided being executed, but their flight led them straight into the lands controlled by the divine sect. Clarifies that his past as a soldier would prevent him from being accepted into the sect, no matter how much he wished to join. He unexpectedly presents him with a straightforward proposal, wanting to know his opinion about joining the sacred sect. He revealed that he was a follower of the heavenly demon, and explained that he believed was ideally suited for a specific mission he was considering. He assures the other man that as long as he follows orders, his past offenses will be wiped clean, and he will be welcomed into the sect as an official member. He points out that his men are putting themselves in danger on his behalf, then wonders aloud if joining forces with integrity would not be a better choice. Wanted to know why he had made this offer, questioning what qualities saw in him and whether he was worried about the risk of betrayal. Before could respond, Jin stepped in, explaining that understanding a person requires observing those who choose to follow him. She points out that his men might lack wisdom. She questioned whether they would ever choose to support a leader with genuinely wicked intentions. Is once more filled with appreciation for the loyalty of his soldiers. Silently concluded that his scheme was now fully set, every element fitting perfectly into his design. Later on, brought his written proposal to the heavenly demon and described his idea. He admitted that it wasn't a grand scheme. Instead, he simply wanted to start a school. He clarifies that while their attempts involving intimacy have decreased the presence of bandits. As a result, children now have fewer chances to experience the comfort and safety associated with their gender. This caused their belief to grow weaker. The school where he studied sought to address this issue. There, students were taught reading, writing, and the principles of sex doctrine as a natural part of their education. This approach helped spread the influence of the doctrine and established a way to foster new followers. The heavenly demon praised the strategy, calling it ingenious, while internally scoffed, attributing the so-called perfect plan to the side effects of his martial arts, though he quickly dismissed that thought from his mind. The master inquires about a particular section of the report, expressing curiosity about whether he plans to instruct on anything beyond the doctrine. Agreed, unveiling the last part of his strategy. He intended for martial arts to become a regular part of the school's routine, introduced as daily physical training for everyone. The heavenly demon questioned whether was proposing that the demonic arts be taught to children. The master shares that while it is possible to overcome the harmful side effects of the demonic arts, passing this knowledge to individuals who lack integrity would only lead to greater and needless pain. Responds by assuring that the lessons awaiting the children have nothing to do with demonic arts. However, only the fundamental and outward forms of martial arts were practiced. The heavenly demon realized that planned to choose the most exceptional children from the group and later instruct them in the ways of the demonic arts. Acknowledged this plan. Points out that, regardless of whether the children eventually master the demonic arts, gaining a solid grasp of the fundamentals will greatly impact their futures. He believes these young students will grow into valuable assets for the sect. Disclosed the last stage of his scheme, explaining that the soldiers who had joined them after abandoning their posts would assist in carrying it out. They had studied martial arts techniques used by the military, which, although not as fast to master, did not cause any harmful effects. Since their goal was to join the sect, relying on these methods would help them build a solid foundation in basic martial arts without any trouble. He mentions that these individuals possess a variety of skills, making them suitable candidates to manage academies in regions where qualified personnel are scarce. The heavenly demon acknowledged dedication and valuable efforts. As a gesture of appreciation, he offered the special privilege of choosing the name for the newly established academy. He wonders aloud whether the other has already chosen a name. Suspects that the concept behind the academy draws influence from elements of contemporary society. He thought of a place dedicated to teaching martial arts and physical training, where students also learned important values, much like his experiences with Taekwondo. He proposes that the dojo be called dojo. Following his accomplishment, fell onto his bed, overcome by fatigue. Jin announced her decision to delay their lessons for the day, yet encouraged him to bathe before heading to bed. However, declined her suggestion, explaining that he simply wanted to finish the day, particularly since the master had already acknowledged his dedication. Though hesitant, gives in to the request. Experiences a sense of relief as his business trip comes to an end, looking forward to reuniting with the next day. After departs, he reflects on the prospect of encountering. He questions whether his sudden absence may have angered her, but he hopes she will quickly forgive him, especially since he has brought her a present. Late at night, noticed an unexpected figure in his room and questioned the person's reason for being there. His heart sinks as he recognizes the man before him, his third eldest brother, Juan. Juan expressed his desire to meet with in secret, making sure the guards, whom viewed more as watchdogs than protectors, remained unaware of their meeting. Expressed admiration for, reflecting on how the master had felt immense pride in him. He recognized that innovative concepts, such as the reporting system and the dojo, were approaches far beyond anything could have conceived on his own. Questions inwardly whether Juan's visit is motivated by jealousy toward him. One kept questioning what set him apart from. As he continues talking, his eyes catch sight of the present that purchased for. Juan comes to understand that nature sets him apart in a way that Juan cannot relate to. He appeared to have a friendly relationship with a young woman, and it made sense that everyone found his intelligence appealing. He likened himself to, thinking of himself as aged, exhausted, and utterly useless. In his mind, he reasoned that a person like him deserved to die, or instead, should bring about the end of everyone else. Faced Juan, who was overwhelmed by paranoia, and seized him firmly. He insisted with a raised voice that Juan's harsh words about himself were unfounded, reminding him that someone held in such high regard should never speak so lowly of himself. Juan's eyes widened with surprise as he cautiously inquired whether he actually held the position of being the second most respected person. Expressed that he held their master in the highest regard, with Juan following closely in his admiration. Persisted in offering compliments, admitting his own imperfections and eagerness to grow. He expressed admiration for, regarding him as a guide and someone worth emulating. He gestures toward the present in his hand, mentioning that it is intended for a young girl he is acquainted with. He adds that, according to her, men similar to one are quite well liked. Inwardly, he feels guilty for bringing up's name without her permission. Juan appeared touched by the words, yet a hint of doubt lingered in his expression as he questioned whether was making fun of him. Stood his ground, insisting that his statement was true, and even reinforced his deception by asserting that the master had expressed similar words. Clarifies that, despite appearances, the master constantly reprimands him. Each time, he reminds him that he should take lessons from his third eldest brother. He mentions how the master often bragged about the 14 shadow strikes that one had perfected, claiming they were the most powerful assassination techniques known, and noting that Wan's presence always brought him a sense of calm. Wan's face shifted abruptly, shadowed by a menacing glare, as he demanded in a cold, chilling voice whether the information he'd heard was indeed correct. His heart races as he suddenly fears that his words might have been a mistake. Without warning, Wan reached for his sword and unsheathed it in a swift motion. Announced that the move he just used marked the beginning of the 14 shadow strikes. Receives instructions to reflect on his sword and to commit himself fully to improving his abilities with it. He slides his sword back into its scabbard and lets know that he appreciated spending time together. Before departing, the visitor promised to come back frequently, causing to shake with terror. Once the man departed, realized that the fear had shaken him so badly, he considered whether a fresh pair of underwear was in order. The following morning, informs of his plans to step outside for a walk to help his food settle. In truth, he feels a surge of excitement at the prospect of seeing, and intends to overwhelm her with warmth and care, hoping it will compensate for the restless night he endured because of an unexpected visit. Steps in and prevents him from moving forward. She explained to him that, because he had been unable to complete his doctrinal lessons the previous day, she now planned to use this moment to help him catch up on the material he missed. Silently panics, confused and distressed by her actions toward him. Responds with a chilly demeanor, making it clear that his own advancement takes priority over hers. She wonders aloud if something else might be holding him back from focusing on his studies at the moment. He quickly invents a reason, claiming concern about getting drowsy after a meal, before accepting the circumstances and silently offering an apology in his thoughts. At the same time, stands by herself at the spot where they always meet, quietly anticipating his arrival. While he is studying, struggles to keep his eyes open, overwhelmed by a heavy wave of sleepiness. He confesses to feeling exhausted, yet conceals the true cause's frightening visit that had occurred the night before. He requested a moment outside to get some fresh air, and assured him that she would remain there until he returned. Weary from the day, questioned whether his third eldest brother planned to drop by again that night. He tolerated the constant praise simply to keep himself safe, though deep down, he hoped Wan would allow him some peace and not disturb his rest. He understands that it's unfair to hope for kindness from the sect members, and now, his only desire is to rest quietly beside. All at once, he spotted standing ahead of him in the hallway, her unexpected appearance leaving him puzzled. As he looked closer, he realized her hair appeared more vibrant and red than he remembered. She referred to him as, which left him bewildered, prompting him to question how she had discovered where he was. He voices his worry about the late hour, reminding her that her mother will likely be upset when she gets home. Without warning, she seized his arm, her voice dropping to a chilling tone as she demanded to know the reason he had left her behind. She recalled the vow they had made to spend time playing together each day. Hurried to offer an apology, attempting to clarify that his absence had a valid explanation. However, before he could finish, she interrupted him, insisting that he hadn't made any mistake. She expresses her understanding, acknowledging his status as the esteemed follower of the heavenly demon. She then extended an invitation for him to join her at her clan, promising that they could share meals, rest, and enjoy games together. She playfully teased him, claiming she would be accountable for everything he did, while he responded by urging her to calm down. In that instant, recalls a reality he had long tried to ignore. It became clear that had mastered the demonic arts as well, proving herself to be a genuine part of the sect. The vision abruptly dissolves, leaving sprawled across the earth before Jin. Jin questions about his disheveled condition. At that moment, arrives and demands to know his identity. Overcome with fury, lets out a piercing scream and lunges at. She blamed the girl for interfering in the relationship between her and her father. Considers the possibility that a demonic spirit might be controlling the girl. Raised his voice, pleading for mercy as he urged that the girl should not be hurt, insisting she was merely a child possessed by a sinister demon. She requests that the other person simply restrain her. Quickly grabs him and guides him away from danger, then checks to see if he has been hurt. tried to calm worries, then inquired about condition. Explained that she had used a basic demonic skill to momentarily hinder movements, but assured him that would be back to normal before long. Abruptly escaped and launched another assault, wounding shoulder while he shielded. Demanded that he move aside, making it clear she wanted a clear path. She planned to end's life. She wonders aloud, her voice tinged with jealousy, whether he and High Honor share a unique connection. During a shadowy moment, fears that without by her side, he might leave her behind. However, the troubling idea quickly faded away when unexpectedly embraced her. He expresses regret for leaving suddenly and without any explanation. He clarified that his master's task required immediate attention. He never got the opportunity to let her know, particularly because nobody else was aware of their secret encounters. Went on to apologize too, admitting that if he had mentioned his journey sooner, she might not have felt so anxious. However, he confessed that he hesitated because he feared it would disrupt the moments they shared. He confessed that his own selfishness stemmed from his dislike of having their time together disrupted. Wondered aloud whether harbored a deep hatred for, but tearfully shook her head, insisting that she did not. Expresses regret for causing shoulder injury, but responds calmly, assuring her that his wound is nothing serious. Abruptly questioned about when he had grown so familiar with the clan's heir, leaving puzzled as he wondered aloud if was also acquainted with. He reacts with surprise upon hearing the clan's name, prompting to clarify that this is the only granddaughter of the family. Later realized from his confused response that he truly had no knowledge of the tradition. Curious, then inquired which custom she was referring to. Without warning, a cluster of graceful women appeared through the rain. Assures him that she will give him an explanation at another time. Inquires about their identities. Explained to him that the woman standing at the front was Lady, who was Smother. Observes that her own expression of anger mirrors the way, appears when she is upset. At that moment, understood that her mother was probably furious. Tried to comfort by promising he would speak with her mother, and asked her to be patient until then. Nodded in agreement, prompting Hay to inquire about his next course of action. He calmly responds that he intends to be the one who meets her before anyone else. And moved ahead, approaching Lady and the group of attendants gathered around her. He approached her, offering a polite greeting before announcing that he was the 8th disciple of the heavenly demon. With a curious look, he inquired whether her presence was related to. The woman nodded in agreement, yet she mentioned that she had a question for him before proceeding. She wondered aloud about his true intentions. Acted as if he didn't comprehend the situation, while she warned him not to act clever. The woman reveals her awareness that arrived by herself in search of him, implying a prior connection between them, especially since is not someone who typically reaches out to others first. This suggested that had a reason for his actions and had chosen to disregard tradition. Faces allegations that he manipulated feelings to serve his own interests. He firmly rejects the accusation, claiming they only met accidentally, formed a friendship, and that this is the honest truth, regardless of whether she accepts it. He demanded to know the reason behind the tradition that seemed to upset everyone, while the woman questioned whether his teacher had ever explained it to him. Takes responsibility for what happened, acknowledging her mistake and expressing her regret. Stood up for her, explaining that her attention had been solely on helping him get ready for the entrance exam. Respectfully requests that the woman clarify the matter for him. She consented to the request, but explained that she preferred to have the conversation in private because speaking openly in front of made her uncomfortable. Once they were alone, turned to her and inquired about the mysterious custom that everyone seemed unwilling to discuss in her presence. Lady started to describe the tradition, making it clear that girls from the clan learn a special form of martial arts from a young age, which unintentionally leads them to develop intense and obsessive personalities. Because of this tradition, people are not allowed to interact with the child until she forms a strong attachment to a non-living object, which then becomes the focus of her fixation. Wondered aloud whether the reason was simply a concern that could endanger those around her. In response, the woman explained that if the situation were truly that straightforward, there would be no need for such a tradition at all. She points out that the world is far more complicated than it seems. It was only natural for bonds to form between people, yet these connections proved temporary, as illness, injury, and death inevitably brought them to an end. She goes on to clarify that individuals belonging to the divine sect face even higher risks. In the event that the individual they are bonded with passes away, they collapse emotionally, overwhelmed by the situation. She then confesses that previously adversaries had attempted to manipulate the family by using threats against the individuals their daughters cared about, seeking to use this vulnerability for control. Jin Haeon finished explaining, making it clear that the tradition exists to keep safe, and emphasized that this was her mother's reasoning. Once her words come to an end, Lady gets ready to depart. The idea was expressed that farewells were not needed. Blocks her path and questions whether she has finished justifying herself. Eyes widened in surprise as she quickly attempted to smooth things over, urging to offer an apology. Paid no attention to her response and firmly asked his question again, his tone laced with accusation as he suggested that the lady had wronged. He accuses her of compelling her daughter to study a forbidden art, hiding behind tradition as an excuse, while simultaneously using that same tradition to withhold her affection as a mother. He challenges her, wondering if was ever truly allowed to make her own decision about it. He persisted in placing the blame on her, questioning whether she had any real understanding of what actually desired. Unaware, the girl's mother failed to notice that her actions were forcing her daughter to give up everything. Lady's temper flared as she demanded to know what experience someone as inexperienced as him could possibly have to make such outrageous claims. He tearfully wondered if he understood just how great a sacrifice it had been for them to abandon their own daughter. Responds in a distant tone, claiming ignorance. He understood that everything had fallen apart simply because she didn't trust enough. The woman appears shocked as she processes the claim he has just made. He then shouted desperately, insisting that he was completely unaware of anything. He lunges forward with lethal intent, aiming to end the other's life. Without warning, her hand freezes halfway through its motion. Upon the arrival of the heavenly demon, the lady quickly dropped to her knees and offered a respectful greeting to the sect leader standing before her. The master hurried over, intending to make sure arrived on time for his training. However, upon his arrival, he encountered an unfamiliar and unexpected sight. He glanced over at, expressing that several questions were on his mind. Before anything else, he is curious to learn what was implied when the other accused him of doubting the faithfulness of this sacred sect. At the same time, remained outside, standing in the rain as she waited. Confronted by the fury of the heavenly demon, starts to clarify where he stands on the matter. He recalls his master's earlier assurance that any side effects caused by the demonic arts are ultimately surmountable. He goes on to challenge the existing practice, highlighting how it automatically expects to be unable to handle the side effects. Before anyone can misinterpret his words, he quickly explains that he has no intention of suggesting the lady lacks faith in the sect. She appealed to Faith's sense of motherhood, urging her to place greater trust in her daughter. Insists that, despite youth, she possesses wisdom and strength beyond her years. She possesses the strength to handle the side effects of her martial arts technique. Even if her energy strays off course, she will, with some assistance, undoubtedly manage to conquer the challenge by herself. He finishes his address by noting that Lady, being a mother, understands this truth more deeply than anyone else. The woman feels touched by what he says and wonders aloud how someone like him can have such unwavering faith in. Explains that belongs to the distinguished and honorable clan, which is the reason behind it. Who had been quietly observing from afar, felt a profound sense of emotion swell within her, as she realized her mother had finally noticed her presence. He lets her know that they need to leave, but attempts to speak up. Her mother, her tone icy, questioned whether her daughter planned to request another visit in the future. Responds with determination, assuring them of her commitment and silently promising herself to grow into a person deserving of the clan. She pledged to finish every meal and push herself even more in training, hoping these efforts would earn her the chance to go back. His mother insisted that she needed to focus on her studies as well, and cheerfully accepted this requirement. Once they had departed, the heavenly demon observed that the young heir of the clan appeared to have already developed a deep fascination with. He cautions him that, while today's incident resulted in just a small injury, the same side effects might prove fatal if the situation were different. He wonders aloud whether he is truly capable of dealing with her. Responded with unwavering confidence, insisting that would never cause him harm. He also expressed his willingness to withstand anything she might do, showing he was ready for any challenge. The heavenly demon offered a gentle smile, granting permission for his disciple to follow his own judgment, all the while harboring a quiet admiration for the young man's bravery. The master realizes that created an ingenious system beyond anything he had considered himself, and also boldly challenged the formidable clan. He understands that managing this situation successfully could ensure the clan's unwavering support for. Even if there came a time when was no longer his student, this knowledge would still hold great value. Several days passed. While taking a break from his training, felt a sense of relief, realizing that tensions with the clan had not resurfaced. Rushed over to and embraced him with joy. At that moment, understood that, because the heavenly demon had intervened directly, no one would dare criticize the situation. He recalls the anxiety he felt when his master arrived late, and at the same time, inquires whether he has been keeping up with his studies. He gently placed his hand on her head, feeling certain that facing them earlier had been the correct choice. Believed that even among the ruthless members of the demonic sect, there were boundaries that should never be crossed, such as child abuse. He cherished these peaceful times feeling that without them, he might lose his grip on reality. Wondered aloud about how he had spent his day. Recalls the present he had brought for her. He explained that during a recent business trip, he came across something he believed would suit her perfectly, so he decided to purchase it as a gift. He wonders aloud whether she would like to give it a try. Felt a surge of emotion as she embraced the box, realizing that this was the first time her brother had ever given her a present. Questioned the reason behind her hesitation, and she explained that she wanted to save it for a special occasion, worried it could get stained if she wore it now. From afar, Jin observed the situation, noting that appeared to be managing her side effects with a fair amount of stability. Without warning, his attention is drawn to a pair of individuals making their way toward her. Immediately realizes who stands before him, his elder siblings, Wei Jin and Wan. Offered a warm greeting to the group. Meanwhile, found himself puzzled by Jin's presence, since he had grown accustomed to seeing Wan come by at night instead. Clarifies that he was responsible for bringing Jin to this place. Revealed that he was dealing with staffing issues within the Red Dragon Corps, and after hearing about its clever reputation, he had come to seek his assistance. He requests that he share his knowledge with his older brother, who often acts without thinking. Worried that denying might provoke his wrath, carefully inquires about what issue needs to be addressed. Chooses to remain silent and pay attention to what he has to say for the time being. He bowed respectfully and offered an apology, admitting his concern that he might not have the answer. Explained that the issue at hand involved selecting the vice-captain for the Red Dragon Corps, emphasizing that he wouldn't have sought assistance if the choice had been simple. Felt a wave of relief, grateful that remained calm and had not added to his responsibilities, silently congratulating himself on his ideal reaction. Spotted nearby and offered her a friendly welcome. He recalled hearing that she frequently traveled too, and his eyes landed on the gift box she was holding. Observed that the box remained firmly shut, so he stepped forward and offered his assistance. An attempt to intervene, assuring him that the door is simple to open. Unable to control his immense power, ends up breaking the wooden box into pieces. Let out a terrified scream, her voice echoing her horror. Fueled by anger, she demanded to know how he could have the audacity to damage the present her brother had given her. Responded with an icy tone, admitting fault, which instantly enraged. Overcome by anger, she lunged at him, shouting threats to end his life. Before she could do more, quickly intervened, placing a hand over her mouth to silence her. Attempted to soothe her, reassuring her that everything inside the box remained unharmed. Tears streamed down his face as she clutched the gift tightly, while observed in surprise, realizing that the connection between them was far stronger than he had imagined. Requested that his brothers leave the room so he could help regain her composure in private. Expresses regret for his reckless behavior, assures that he will return and then departs. Once Wan departed, a sense of relief washed over the guards. They reminded to look after his well-being, unaware that secretly wished Wan would never come back. Observes that Wei Jin remains calmer than he had expected, leading to consider easing his own guard when interacting with him. While offered comfort too, abruptly remarked that the great young master was nothing but a fool, who had been on his way out, stopped in his tracks as his expression shifted instantly to one of furious anger. His heart raced with anxiety as he attempted to quiet fear gnawing at him that could have harmed her. However, it is already too late, has already turned to face them. He demanded to know what she had just said, his voice carrying a menacing edge. And both grew anxious, urging to offer an apology without delay. Instructed to silence by placing a hand over her mouth. Raised her voice, boldly declaring that the esteemed young master was so foolish he couldn't manage to open a simple box. His fury erupted, his eyes shining with a fierce crimson light, making instantly aware that he was facing serious consequences. Stood in bewilderment, struggling to understand the sudden shift in mood. Moments earlier had called himself a fool, yet now he seemed to be growing angry, leaving, puzzled by the contradiction. Determined to keep safe, called out too, announcing that he had discovered a way to resolve this issue. Paused briefly, turning to inquire which solution the other person meant. Swiftly comes up with a plan, proposing that the third team leader be elevated to vice captain and assuring everyone that the leader's shortcomings are not important. He explains that because Jinhawk holds the position of captain, it does not matter how strong his deputy is in combat. She thought about how the third team leader excelled at managing tasks and would serve as ideal support for him, silently wishing this reassurance might ease his frustration. However, the strategy fails when misunderstands the comment as yet another slight. He accuses of suggesting that, because he is foolish, he should allow the clever third team leader to advance instead. His frustration grows even stronger and quickly recognizes that things have only gotten more complicated. Unleashed a powerful assault, forcing to acknowledge that escaping was impossible, and his only option was to defend himself against the incoming strike. He moved with as much speed as he could muster, clenching his sword in a firm grasp. He managed to fend off the assault using the flying soul-seizing sword technique, yet overwhelming strength left him momentarily paralyzed with shock. At his current skill, he could hardly believe he managed to block the attack. It felt like a miracle. Inside, he desperately pleaded for Wan's help, knowing he couldn't handle the frenzied Jin alone. At the final second, Wan suddenly emerges behind Jinhawk. Approaching from behind, the attacker attempts a sudden strike, yet the other person swiftly dodges without difficulty. She followed through with a powerful punch, striking him with force. Wan absorbs the blow without flinching and counters with a rapid succession of hits that land squarely on Jinhawk. Is hurled backward, his features contorted with a furious and wild expression. Stood frozen, overwhelmed by disbelief at the madness unfolding before him. Hurried over too, concern etched on her face as she checked to see if he was all right. He offered her comfort, then inquired about his condition. She explained that she had struck pressure points, rendering her unconscious. Hearing this, he commended her quick thinking and effective action. Noticed the fight happening before her, and announced her intention to participate alongside the others. As tension between the two brothers grew fiercer, Jin urged to use the chaos as a chance to get away. His mind raced with frustration as he searched for a way out, realizing how much help they truly needed. He notices the difference in abilities between his brothers is overwhelming, making him aware that if he flees on his own, he could make it out alive. However, this would leave facing a life-threatening situation. He realizes that the group's survival depends on his decision to step in and take action. At the same time, Wei Jin relentlessly attacks, causing Wan to collapse. Hurried toward, urgently trying to prevent him from making a mistake he couldn't undo. Seized her clothing firmly, his strong hold making escape impossible. She was hoisted high above the ground before being thrown down with tremendous force, resulting in a powerful crash against the earth. Driven by desperation to alter the outcome of the fight, shouted at and accused him of acting foolishly. He mocks him with a sarcastic question, wondering aloud if his head serves any purpose other than appearance, and implying that he still hasn't realized he is the subject of the conversation. He managed to get under skin, prompting to face him and question whether he was looking for a fight. Launched his assault, silently vowing that the dangerous pursuit had officially begun. Urgently shouted at, telling him to escape as quickly as possible. Wan attempted to intervene, urging her to take a break and get some rest. He promised to keep the youngest disciple safe. Made it clear that if they waited for assistance, no one would survive. Their only chance was to take to the rest of the group. The intense fight raged on while rushed at, launching a powerful assault. The second figure moved with remarkable speed, skillfully evading the attack at the very last moment. Saw his chance and quickly advanced, delivering another heavy blow too. Just as Jin Hawk's strike was about to land, Wan emerged unexpectedly, stepping in to shield against the attack and stopping the blow in its tracks. Wan turned too, curious about what he intended to do next. Shouted a warning to escape and immediately sprinted away. Suddenly understands what is happening. As noise from the disturbance spreads, curious onlookers begin to gather at the scene. Wan would find some relief from the pressure, yet anxiety would remain, unable to be soothed without the master there. Realized he needed to make himself the center of attention. He continued to sprint, hurling harsh words in his direction as he went. He questioned the man's actions, wondering why he chose to target someone innocent. He manages to capture his undivided attention. Believes the plan will work if the others can block anyone who tries to get close to him. Launched a powerful assault in his direction, his movements filled with fury and determination. As anger reached its highest point, he hurled his sword with tremendous force, catching off guard since this action had never been anticipated in his original strategy. A tremendous blast shakes the area, causing one to cry out's name in alarm, his voice filled with concern. At that instant, the heavenly demon appeared and commanded the others to retreat. As the master moved ahead, he commended everyone's hard work and announced his intention to complete the task on his own. His fury did not subside. Instead, he shouted menacing warnings in his direction. The heavenly demon, with an icy demeanor, commands him to stop immediately. Fought inwardly, battling the urge to obey his master's order. The master wondered aloud if there was a need to repeat his question. Struggled desperately, his body racked with agony as he battled against the overpowering influence of his master. At last, he falls to the ground and bows low, offering a greeting to the supreme demon with utter humility. Collapses onto the ground, overcome by a mixture of fatigue and relief. While the guards moved to hold in place, gazed at his master with deep respect, finally understanding that his master was indeed a heavenly demon. His outburst was swiftly brought under control, and since no one was badly hurt, the decision was made to punish him with isolation in the closed hall. Because he'd been responsible for what happened, the clan accepted the mild sentence without protest. However, there remained one regrettable aspect. Both had sustained injuries during the battle. Even though was hurt, she remained determined to begin their lessons right away. Objected, questioning how studying could be possible given their current state. Wondered aloud if he might rather focus on training in external martial arts, but he quickly raised his voice to clarify that this was not what he intended. She tells him that continuing to train with an injury might cause lasting harm, so for the time being, he must focus on his studies instead. The heavenly demon arrives to see them. They offer him a polite greeting as he enters, and he responds by telling them to stay in their seats. Let his master know that he was feeling better, crediting the doctor's expertise for his recovery. The master feels a sense of relief wash over him and chooses to give a reward. He was recognized for his swift decision-making that kept the harm to a minimum, as well as for the successes he had accomplished in the past. Grew curious about what kind of reward awaited him, and soon the master presented him with the sect's treasured elixir known as. He goes on to mention that additional time will be given for training, and understands that this will involve even more effort. His eyes filled with tears, overwhelmed by deep gratitude for the master's kindness, which she believed to be nothing short of divine. Meanwhile, let out a weary sigh, feeling exasperated by her overflowing excitement. The master informed that there was something else he needed to share with him. The eldest brother expressed a desire to meet him. He makes an exception by granting permission for a private meeting. Pauses, uncertain about meeting him, yet understands that confronting him is unavoidable in the end. Still uncertain, wonders aloud about the strength of the closed hall's doors, questioning whether they are truly secure.